Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the next in our series of the Jewish Impact. Tonight, we are truly privileged and honored to be able to welcome to Woodside Park. Despite the snow, he's managed to make it. And that is, of course, we're delighted to welcome Mr. Shimon Cohen. Shimon, as many of you may know, is the founder and chairman of the PR office. He's a media relations and reputation management specialist who's advised a wide range of clients ranging from governments and multinational corporations to public and voluntary sector organizations. He's headed the Nelson Mandela Foundation campaign, writing a number of speeches for Madiba, and during the 2016 FIFA presidential election campaign, Shimon headed the communications team for His Royal Highness Prince Ali of Jordan. He's also been the executive director of the office of the then Chief Rabbi Lord Jakobovich, Zichrono Livracha. And closer to home, we're all familiar with Shimon's incredible work for Shechita UK and Miller UK. There's so much more to say, and we're going to find out more. But first and foremost, good evening, Shimon.
Good evening, Rabbi Hackenbroch. Gila, thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored, delighted to be here. Thank you.
We're delighted to have you.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Is it okay if I call you Shimon?
Of course.
Okay.
Mr. Cohen is my dad.
Okay. I know that feeling, yeah. Do you mind to start with, we have a curiosity about in who you are. So your family, possibly where you grew up. How did you end up being and doing what you're doing today? So a bit of a life journey.
So I thank you very much. I grew up in South Wales, in Cardiff. My family arrived in the United Kingdom around 1912 from what is now Ukraine, that was then Russia, near to Uman, in a little village called Kiblech. Uman at that time was not, for those who know, anything like Uman is today. It was a very different place. And they arrived in South Wales, and there are lots of myths about why or how or what. Essentially, it was a place where there was a landsman, somebody who'd come from the area, and they were able to get in. At that time, you could only get into the United Kingdom if you were related to somebody who was already settled. And so my great-grandfather, who's pictured behind me, their name was Schumacher, and they adopted the name of Cohen, belonging to this landsman who was already there, which is how this great, large, giant family of Levium all carry the surname Cohen. And we all moved en masse there. I grew up after they had moved after the Second World War into Cardiff. I grew up there. My first sort of, it was a very Orthodox community, very frum community. Everybody, there was no question, everybody went to davening every day. It wasn't an optional extra, that's what you did. We also went to Cheder for 3 hours on a Sunday morning, for 2 hours on a Monday night, 2 hours on a Wednesday night, and 2 hours on a Thursday night. Wow. So my Jewish education was pretty full on from a very early age. I think that my father made his first visit to Israel in just after the Six-Day War in '67, and came back with something quite unique in our family, which was an experience of Zionism. And so from an early age, we were brought up both in a deeply religious home, but with a very much a Zionist direction. And I'm sort of giving you a very quick potted history. And then I got involved somehow through a cousin, I think, who lived in London, with B'nai Akiva. And I started B'nai Akiva in Cardiff, and we had it was very successful. We had over 100 children at one point. And that's how I got involved in the Jewish community. And then I eventually, fast forwarding, got my first job was as a community youth officer at Stanmore United Synagogue. And that's sort of, I was very fortunate because I got into a community there who where there were a lot of very influential Jewish community figures. Stanley Kalms, now Lord Kalms, who at the time was the chairman of the Shul and went on to be a trustee of the United Synagogue. The late Sidney Frosch was president of the United Synagogue. A number of people, and a legendary figure called Moshe Davis, Now, Moshe Davis suggested to me one day that I should meet the chief rabbi. I was flattered and honored, and well, essentially he offered me a job. And after Stanmore, I went to work at the office of the chief rabbi, and that's really that's how I got involved in Jewish community things. And I worked as the executive director of Lord Jacobowicz's office for 10 years. And then just before he retired, it was suggested to me that my currency would be higher being the executive director of the office of the chief rabbi and private secretary to the chief rabbi, rather than private secretary to the former chief rabbi or the former executive director of the office of the chief rabbi. So with Lord Jacobowicz's blessing, I left, went into the public relations industry, and sort of very much kept my hand in with the type of thing that I had done always for Lord Jacobowicz, which was speech writing, presentation, messaging, helping convey his messages to the media. And that skill that I had learned on the job really transferred into really what the public relations industry is. And I worked at a very large public relations company for very many years. I became the chief executive there, and that was a great honor and privilege, and I worked there for a very long time. And eventually I decided it was time to start my own business. And 15 years ago I did, and founded the PR office, and managed to develop what we now have is a very successful, thank the good Lord, business. So running that company with all the type of activity that we do, and using some of those professional skills to enhance the reputation and positioning of Jewish community things, frankly, is my dream job. And I bounce out of bed every day, and I've got the best job.
Wow. Okay. There's many areas I would love to hear more about, but I tell you where my curiosity went. You worked for 10 years under Lord Jacobowicz. Did you have any interactions, and I'm just throwing this in, with the late Lady J?
Oh, I mean, daily throughout those 10 years. And actually, the funny thing about it is that they were so much part of my life that when they retired and I had moved on to other things, I spent probably the next 10 years doing two jobs, my day job, as it were, and continuing to be involved in every aspect of their world and their life, and remained close to Lady Jacobowicz literally until the day she passed away. And I say almost literally because we were making arrangements for her to come and stay with her sister-in-law, who lives literally around the corner from me. Right. She was coming to stay for that Shabbos to join my 50th birthday celebrations over that Shabbos, and she passed away on the Friday. So really, we were making arrangements to spend that Shabbos together, literally to the last minute. So
how special! How special to have that relationship for such a long time.
Very, very, very special.
Sorry to go off target.
No, not at all.
No. Millions of memories of a truly unique couple. And truly, Lady Jacobowicz is just there. We will, I believe, never see her like again.
We agree.
Any amusing stories you can share with us? We've heard a couple.
I could tell you thousands of stories about life with them. There are just so many. Anyone I pick would just be just one, but I don't know. Literally, if this was a talk about the life and times of Lord and Lady Jacobowicz, we could fill 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes.
We'll have to have you back for that. So
truly wonderful people, and for my entire family, for my daughters, Auntie Amelie has always been central to their lives, and 10 years on remains so.
Well, I have to say personally, being a Stanmore boy, that I have fond memories of you being an integral part and a leading light in our community. And I remember very well Moshe Davis schlepping his stender out on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, your answers questioned, and so on and so forth. Very much an inspiration to me as well as everyone else. But we want to move on to discuss a bit about, in more depth, your involvement and contribution to the Jewish community. Tonight's series is called Jewish Impact. And as I said to you on the phone, the reason why we honed in on speaking to you tonight is because you have been very much at the forefront of being our ambassador to the wider community for so many issues and so many challenges that we have faced over so many generations. Perhaps you'd like to share with us, in terms of your public role beyond the office of the Chief Rabbi, what you have been involved with, and perhaps any lasting memories.
Well, there are actually so many, and I sort of almost sort of fall into these things. I don't really sort of set out to do them. I fall into them in many respects. I mean, Shechita UK is one that many people know about, and the work goes on day after day after day to ensure that Shechita is protected in the United Kingdom, and in communities where they seek advice and guidance as to how we do it in the UK. And we do get involved pretty much all over the place. But I got involved in that. The story is very cute in some respects. I got involved many years ago before I had started my own company. I had a phone call from a man who I became very close to and very friendly with, a man called Shlomo Weingarten, who's passed away. He called me, and I hadn't had anything to do with him or Shechita or anything at all. He phoned me up one day, and those were the days before you had a mobile phone that you know who's calling you. So your phone rings and you answer it. So you're stuck, really. So I pick up the phone. He tells me Shlomo Weingarten. He tells me president of the Shechita board. And can you talk to me about Shechita? And I said, no, thanks very much. He said, listen, in Mishpocha. And he explained to me how he was contact connected. So I sort of didn't have the choice, really. I was landed with speaking to him. And he said to me, why don't you want to speak about Shechita? And I said, well, I'll tell you really simply why. Because in the 1980s, I was at the office of the Chief Rabbi, and there was a whole big drama about Shechita and legislation and what have you. And I was right in the middle watching rabbis from across the community tear each other to pieces. And to be honest with you, the biggest problem was the rabbis fighting each other. It wasn't the government. And I don't need it anymore. And he said, oh, please, 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 it's very vital. We need some professional guidance because we are really up against it. And I said, look, my condition is a very simple condition, and it's not me. It's no arrogance here. It's just that if you want me to work, I've got to work in my way. So I need to be able to convince the rabbis that halacha is their business. Halacha of Shechita is their business. It is not my business. And if they tell me it's X, it is going to be X. What I will do is present what they want in a professional manner to those people who need it. It's always very important. Deliver the message in the way that people who are your target audience want to receive it. So pretty obviously, if you are speaking to an English-speaking audience, it is not a very good idea not to speak in English. If you are speaking to government, it's very important to speak in their language. So I presented to the rabbis agreed, okay, we trust this guy. He seems to know what he's talking about. He's not going to get involved in halacha, but he's going to explain how do we present our case. And so that's really where the model came from, which was to say that I just felt that there needed to be a move on from special pleading. Oh, please, please, we're Jews. Remember what happened in the Holocaust. We need a little, I just didn't like that. I just thought it wasn't 20th century, 21st century. I didn't think it was professional enough. And actually, eventually you run out of favors. And so it's not about favors. It's about presenting a case, arguing a case, and being an advocate. And so I sort of developed the role through Shechita UK, being this advocate for Shechita, and that led into more generally an advocate for matters relating to Jewish practice, so far as they fit in with legislation, and that led to the formation of Mila UK and to a lot of work that I do in the education field, mostly for the Haredi schools, in presenting their education practices and processes to government, and trying to work within the law to ensure that everybody remains happy and that those schools do continue to teach in the way that they've always wanted to teach, but in accordance with the rules and regulations. But the summary of it is, it's about advocacy, and it is about how best to present its case, as I said, in the way in which people need to receive it.
It's interesting, you said before that you jump out of bed every morning, you're so excited, you love what you do. I was curious to hear, possibly, what's your proudest moment up to date?
Well, I have to say to those listening or watching, I was not primed for that, but the answer is beyond simple for me. And it's sort of a chapter followed by another one, but my proudest moment to date, without a shadow of a doubt, I got involved in a long, tortuous story, but I got involved in working for the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And my job was essentially to help Nelson Mandela, post his being president of South Africa, presenting his message to the young people of the world about the dangers of HIV and AIDS. This led to being able to bring some of the world's greatest celebrities, sports and music stars together, because he recognized that young people are not going to take a message from an old retired president. They're going to take a message from their hero. So we developed a whole program how to deliver this. It then came that it was his 90th birthday. And we organized in Hyde Park a giant concert with the world's leading rock stars, plus a dinner to mark Nelson Mandela's 90th birthday. The guests included His Royal Highness Prince of Wales, the Prime Minister, who was then Gordon Brown, President Clinton from the United States, Elton John and Emma Thompson, everyone. It was unbelievably successful, raised a huge amount of money, millions of pounds in for the charity. Anyway, that was not my proudest moment. My proudest moment was when everybody had gone home. Everybody had gone home. And the 5 or 6 of us were left a bit worse for wear. And we sort of said, well, how on earth do we top that? And I came up with the idea, really, it was, that we need to make this day, July the 14th, Nelson Mandela Day. It's his birthday, let's make it Nelson Mandela Day. So we, through the relationship that we had with President Clinton, we got hold of the United Nations Secretary General's office and went to see him. And he said, we said, look, this is what we want to do. And he said, it's impossible. And I said, why am I? But nothing's impossible. I'd like to know why. He said, well, there's 2 things. First of all, the United Nations will never designate a day for a living person. Number 1. And number 2, it will never designate a day for a person anyway. So he said to me, for example, November the 8th, I think it is, they wanted it to be Gandhi Day. There was a huge campaign for it to be Gandhi Day. No, it was not allowed. Eventually, that date was marked as Freedom Day, and it's celebrated as Gandhi's birthday. So I said, well, how impossible is impossible? He said, well, you have to have a unanimous vote on the General Assembly of the United Nations. It's never happened. It will never happen for those 2 reasons. My proudest moment was pretty much 12 months later. The General Assembly of the United Nations voted 168 votes in favor with half a dozen or so abstentions. And July the 14th became Nelson Mandela Day. And I have to say, without a shadow of a doubt, that was the proudest moment of my life.
Wow. Wow. I didn't expect that answer, so wow.
But that's why I bounce out of bed every day. I am extremely fortunate. I thank God, literally and practically every day. I'm a very fortunate person. Luck has gone in my direction all the way through. I've received lots and lots of blessings, and the biggest blessing of all is I'm very fulfilled in what I do.
Yeah, it's a blessing. It really is a blessing. Yeah.
It's incredible, as we've already heard, but obviously you are fighting a battle in many, many different areas, spheres, and fronts. Has there ever been an area where it's been rather frustrating, upsetting, and you've said, I can't anymore, I'm going to throw in the towel?
Giving up is not something in my nature. I think we all have it, really. we all have it. I mean, somebody decided on one day in 1912 that today is the day we're leaving. There was no giving up. There was always like, we got to go and do something better. And people say, those the sort of quiz games or what have you, where what is the one person you like to meet, and the one person you'd like to ask the question to. The one person I would like to meet is him, and the one question I would like to ask is, why on that day? Why did you decide on that day to corral the family and say we're leaving? Because you never gave up, and Jews just don't give up. We wouldn't be existing today if we gave up on anything at all. There have been so many times where we could have just said it's just too hard, and so we keep on and on and on, and we keep trying, and we keep bettering ourselves, and we keep achieving. So truthfully, I don't think there have been many times where I've been deeply frustrated, and I have to say, I suppose one of the most frustrating things is today, and I know it's sort of what you want to hear, is the issues relating to freedom of religion. I've taken it upon myself, and I've been given the privilege to stand in front of audiences, parliamentary audiences in different parts of the world, the European Union and different parliaments, and I'm defending our what we believe our right to do certain things. Now, when you're dealing with the 21st century thinking, where religion is a bit silly and a bit old-fashioned and a bit last century, and not really fitting into the I world, as the late Robert Sachs referred to it, as the iPhone, iPad, the I world. When answers come from Google, not from God, when it's very difficult, when the arguments are all done, and at the end of it, it's, well, because God told me I have to. It is frustrating when you realize you're on parallel lines with people. And it can get very, very frustrating. It can get very frustrating when people simply refuse to recognize that there is another position. And I find that very difficult in debating. I've always loved debating. And I remember winning a debating competition in school when I was about 14 or maybe even younger. And the motion, my mother reminds me, I don't really remember, but anyway, the motion was, I must have been about 17 years old. That's right, 17 years old. That's why it's relevant. And the motion was that the voting age should be raised to 21. So, and I had to present that case. So I do difficult things, but sometimes it can be very frustrating when I know that of all processes for killing animals for food, Shechita is a perfectly humane process. It isn't necessarily the most humane. It doesn't matter if it is or it isn't. It's a perfectly humane process. It's possibly more humane than some of the other processes. I know that. I know it because I've studied it, and I know it much more because the science tells me that. Yeah, there's a lot of science that says it isn't, but I'm willing and able to listen to those people who say that it isn't, and I can argue many reasons why ours works for us. But I find it sometimes very frustrating when there are people who simply refuse that there is another, to recognize there's another side to the argument. And I think we all get frustrated in our lives when people simply refuse to listen to common sense. I was very privileged a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, because I volunteer at a special needs school. So I was privileged to get my first shot of the vaccine, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to go to the special needs school. So I got the first shot of the vaccine, and it's amazing how many people who are, well, I thought were educated, intelligent, sensible, intellectual people don't want the vaccine. So it can be frustrating sometimes when people hold a position that to you doesn't have any logic. And it is, but I can't really, to be honest with you, I think of something where I sort of said, you know what, I mean, there have been things that I wouldn't do because I don't think they're doable. Years ago, I was sent with a colleague to Zimbabwe to meet the then president, Robert Mugabe. We thought we were going to win a contract to promote tourism to Zimbabwe. This was before everybody knew how bad a man he was. Very long time ago. I'm talking about the early 1990s. we thought we were going to win a contract to promote tourism, and so we all went. We got ourselves all prepared, and we went to meant to meet the guy, and we had quite a sit down with him, and actually it became very clear after the first minute or two that actually all he wanted was the world to think he was a nice guy, and we didn't take the job. It just, sometimes it's not possible. So it's not really frustrating in some respects, but there have been times where I've said no, not for me.
Thank you for that. One final question from me, and that is as follows. Imagine you got as your client the Jewish people. How do you think, if they walked into the room, the Jewish people at the front is Moses, modern day Moses, he says to you, tell me, Shimon, you're the best in the business. How are the Jewish people doing in terms of PR, and what could we be doing better?
So I'd probably answer the way that Moses answered, by saying, "What, me? I'm not. It's not for me." but you asked. Look, here's the reality. The Prime Minister said this time last year, and he said, "Do everything you can to save the NHS." So, what is the Jewish community doing to save the NHS? The Jewish community is doing unbelievable things to save the NHS. Hatzolah. What an incredible organization that in Northwest London and North London and other parts of the country, we have set up, it has been set up, an ambulance service that takes the weight off the NHS in a huge way. Now that's awesome for the community. And I can tell you also, because I know, that if you call Hatzolah, they don't say, "Are you Jewish?" They say, "Yes, we're on our way." That's one example. And there are dozens of examples of where we have integrated brilliantly, wonderfully into society. Integration and assimilation are two completely different things. Assimilation mustn't. Integration, vital. We are very good people. We have put we wear our hearts on our sleeves. Yes, we do. But the things we do for society in general are truly remarkable. And I would focus on that specifically, what we're doing in the COVID period, because I think some of it's absolutely remarkable. I also remember taking a friend who didn't really know much about Jewish people when I worked at this very large company, taking a friend, we went for a cup of coffee at the Royal Royal Academy. And I wanted to tell him a little bit about what it's like to be Jewish. He'd never met a Jew. He had no idea what it was all about. And I thought to myself, you know what? I could talk about sort of weird practices, but that isn't really what he's really interested in. So I talked about that why do you I wanted to find out about Jews. We're British. We live here. So come to the Royal Academy with me, because I want you just to see what Jews do. And we looked around. The Wolfson wing, the Rip Black wing, the Ronson wing, the this wing, This is where we integrate into society. We make, we give back, we contribute. And one of the amazing things about being Jewish and about being able to put our best foot forward and show is the pride we take as Jews. I know that I haven't. I'm pretty sure very few other people have met the man who invented the vaccine. I mean, I got a huge sense of pride out of the fact that he was Jewish. I thought that was awesome. So those to me are the things that promote the Jewish people. It's not about our weird and wonderful practices that are of no real interest to anybody but us. It's about how we've always played our part in the society around us and how we're able to show that we are fully able to integrate as proper citizens of whichever country we live, make a contribution, and retain our fierce pride in our Yiddishkeit. To me, that's how we should be promoting the Jewish community.
Wow. Wow. So following on that question, and I'm gonna, what would we give our youth if our youth are asked to be ambassadors often, whether it's university students or even younger, in a sentence, what can they do to promote?
Well, in a sentence, I think it's like, oh God, that's a very, very tough question. In a way, it's the Holy Grail, isn't it? In some respects, yeah. Everybody's looking for it. I think we need to better instill a sense of pride about what it is to be Jewish in our young people. I believe that we have somehow aped to a large extent the Church of England. We have devolved responsibility for Yiddishkeit to other people. So, for example, and I'm not saying that my way is the right way, but from a baby age, we learned how to. We didn't. In fact, we didn't have a rabbi in where we davened in Cardiff. We didn't have one. We had the community had rabbonim. Our shtibel didn't have a rabbi because everybody knew what to do and how to do it, and we've devolved that to some respect through chazonim and rabbonim, and in some we've become spectators. We turn up and we're spectators. It is very difficult to generate a sense of pride, involvement, and belonging if you're just a spectator. So I think that young people need, and I have young children, so I'm very, very aware of it. Young people need an anchor. It's not to attend something to watch. It's to be something, to do something. Take a sense of pride in whether it is, whether it's your Zionism or your faith, and you can study and you can, or your Zionism and you can display that, or look at the ways in which we can be proud to be Jewish. Because to me, that's the message for our young people. That look, we all know that there is anti-Semitism around. We all know that. We all know that it's tough sometimes to have to defend things that go on in Israel, even though it's not our business to do so or our duty to do so. But we know we have no choice in school or in the workplace or in universities. We know we have to. So you've got to be prepared to fight those sort of battles. But I'm much more interested in instilling in our young people a huge sense of pride in being Jewish, in specialness in being Jewish. And I believe very strongly that if you have that sense of pride, it's that sort of bulletproof vest to a large extent, and not to hide it. And I'll give you one very small example of really where I saw that in action. Lord Jacobowitz was elevated to the House of Lords, was the first rabbi ever to be so elevated, and entered the House of Lords as Lord Jacobowitz of Regent's Park. Now, he pretty obviously, would always wear a kippah. So he was the first person ever to wear a kippah while sitting in the chamber of the Houses of Parliament. But he also, when he went to the House of Lords, which was probably 3 or 4 times a week, he would always dress in his sort of formal clothing. He wore a Prince Albert coat and a very, and the reason for that was very simple. He always wanted people to say, the rabbi is speaking. To him, he was the rabbi in the House of Lords. He wasn't a member of the House of Lords. And that was to show that there is pride in my Yiddishkeit. There is pride in the way in which I present the case. Because if you impart pride in your Yiddishkeit, then it rubs off on people. And I really do believe that that's our job, is to instill pride in the younger generations in everything about being Jewish.
But I'm hearing you saying, tell me if I'm hearing you correctly, what helps us instill pride in our children, in our teenagers, is also giving them a sense of responsibility for their Judaism. So not just spoon-feeding, letting them get actively involved. But
very, very much so. Devolving Yiddishkeit to someone else has never been the way. It's not what we do. We, just learning, yeshiva learning is about chevrusah, about partnerships. It's not about, like in secular universities where you sit and you listen to a lecture. That's not Jewish learning. It's always about involvement. And that's really where it is. I do genuinely believe that it is about involvement. And there are 1,000,001 ways to involve people, and no one way is the only way.
Yeah, thank you.
Shimon, I want to thank you on behalf of all our viewers and listeners, both those that are live and those that will watch it in the coming days, weeks and months. We appreciate tremendously you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend time with our community. Once again, many in the chat have already expressed their appreciation. They remember you coming to our community to speak. And we wish you bracha v'atzlacha, tremendous success, please God, with all your endeavors in representing our community in the wider community, and also your work in Europe and beyond. Thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed for having me. It's been a real joy, a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Stay home.
Thank you.